right now on Indianapolis This Week. Getting angry about the violence.
That people work together and people that live in the community would stand up for themselves and their own families, then we can address and take back our neighborhoods.
Residents of Indianapolis are fed up with the crime. Today we're talking with a neighborhood leader trying to make a difference. Plus, former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell comes to Indy and gives his take on what needs to change.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
More crime scenes and more voices growing louder about seeking a solution to the violence. We've seen at least 40 homicides this year. 2 cases garnering a lot of attention in the last week. A woman's body was found inside a wooden chest in Lawrence. A 60-year-old man was arrested and now sits in the Marion County Jail. Then a murder that gripped the community, the death of Nathan Trapazzano, a father-to-be who was killed while out on a walk on the city's west side. His accused killer, a 16-year-old boy who police say went on a crime spree when that murder happened. Authorities are charging him as an adult.
From a prosecutor's perspective, he is a murder defendant. He's not a child. He committed a serious offense, has to be held accountable for the offense, and under the law at 16, he is an adult.
Free little red, he innocent, he ain't do none of that.
How do you know?
How do I know? Get these cameras out of my face.
Joining us now is Regina Marsh, the CEO of the Forest Manor Multi-Service Center, which runs outreach programs to the youth and adults in Indianapolis. I often say, Regina, that your program is an oasis there on the city's east side.
Yes.
You do fantastic work out there.
Thank you.
If I can say that. Can I say that?
Yes, you can. You can say it a couple of times.
All right. You do fantastic work. On the issue of youth violence, have we lost control?
I don't believe we've lost control. However, I think we need to step up our efforts to help our community. I think it requires more of us being involved in the day-to-day of what's going on with our families and in our communities. And is there opportunity to lose control? Yes, but we haven't. But we've got to get involved in what's going on in our city.
Regina, you're there. I mean, I don't have to talk to anyone else about being in the epicenter because you work in the community that is most affected. And in the most recent cases, we've seen young men, ages 16, 17, 19. Why weren't they in school? Why weren't they at work? Why were they causing such heinous acts of violence? I know you can't speak for them, but that's sort of the feeling that we all have. Where were the parents and why were those young men not doing productive things?
What's interesting is you'll be surprised that a lot of them do have parents that are involved in their life, but we're dealing with systemic issues that have happened amongst these families for years, and that we've got to, again, go back to looking at what caused the problem in the effort. Mental health is not being addressed in that community to look at. We wonder why a young man smiled going into court. There's got to be more involved than just he's smiling just to smile. There are potentially some mental health issues.
You saw that when you heard that he not only did he smile, he laughed after being engaged allegedly in one of the most heinous crimes in the city so far.
It made me sad. It made me look at that there's something else wrong with this child, and that this child whose mother died of a drowning years ago, what has this child been through from house to house to house, school to school to school? Where is the infrastructure that has surrounded this child and said, what caused this child to be in this place now? And so for me, when I saw it, it was this child needs more help than incarceration, that there's some systemic, there's some mental, there's some family issues that need to be addressed as well.
Do you ever get frustrated that we seem to be having this conversation ever so often, that we always, after a major crime or a major incident, we say, we need to do this, we need to do that? I mean, you're doing the work already. So what, because what is the solution? I think people are sort of hungry to find the answer.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like a broken record. I feel like I'm always asking for resources. I'm asking for volunteers, and I'm asking for people, and I'm saying that we have a plan and we have an ideal on how to correct this, but getting people involved in that plan and getting them to come out, walk with us, build relationships, mentoring is where the disconnect is.
What's it going to take? I mean, are we going to need some sort of mass shooting in downtown Indianapolis, or mass shooting in Hamilton or Johnson County for people to say, you know what, maybe that Regina lady was right. Maybe we need to, or because we just seem to be having this discussion all the time, just different seasons.
My fear is that might take it. That might mean what we have to have, but we don't have to have that happen to realize that the problems are at hand right now. If it takes a mass murder for us to realize as a community we all have to step in and be our brother's keepers in our community, then it's going to take that. But I don't think it does but what can I do to rev up the efforts, to rev up the resources, to get people to really understand they are their brother's keepers. They are to be involved in the lives of our children. They are our children. They are our babies. They're not just mine or anyone's in particular.
The mayor came up with a plan most recently to work with faith-based groups. Is that plan going to work?
I think it takes many plans. I think it takes many different efforts to happen. I think the faith-based effort could be a plan that could work. I think the effort that Forest Manor and the community worked on together could work. I think that many of us have an ideal of how to make, how to do this, but how do we get together and say that each of our plans are relevant, and you take this part, you take this part, and we all work in concert to deal with the issue at hand.
So if I'm watching you right now, and I just want to do something, right, because I think that we have so many good people that live in Indiana. We are a great state with great people. If I wanted to do something right now, what can I do right now to impact the life of a child or an adult who's in distress?
Well, we're focusing on 46218, which is where Forest Manor lives and breathes. If you look at the violence that has happened, it has happened within a 10-block radius of Forest Manor Multi-Service Center, even on the street right next door to us. So Monday the 21st, we are having another meeting, because we've had several since August, to talk about how to be part of that conversation, get into the communities, work with the housing, work with neighborhoods, and actually be on the ground, boots on the ground, working with these families and in this community. And we want to empower them with resources. So say you're out here talking to a young man that doesn't know which way to turn. We want you to know that you could send them this place for workforce development, this place is having a job fair, this place has mental health. And so our job is to get people empowered to actually go back out and share the word with the community.
Regina Marsh at Oasis on the city's east side, Forest Manor Multi-Services Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Will you come back again?
Guaranteed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The issue of violence is one that is also on the mind of the country's former top military man and diplomat. I had a chance to talk to Colin Powell before he addressed hundreds at the 28th annual Stewart Speaker Series. Powell and his wife have committed themselves to mentoring programs and also to finding ways to get kids on the right track.
What do kids need to be successful in life or to get a good start in life? They need responsible, caring, loving adults in their lives. Hopefully, parents and family. If that isn't enough, then we got to bring in mentors. We got to bring in people who will come in and get in the lives of these children and show them the correct way to behave and the proper route to take to a successful future in life. Secondly, children need safe places in which to learn and to grow. Third, they need a healthy start in life. Fourth, a marketable skill through a quality education. And fifth, an opportunity to give back. These are the things that we always hope a family could provide to a child. It's what I got. It's why I was able to come up out of the South Bronx, born in Harlem, South Bronx, and was able to come out of that. But unfortunately, it's not just a matter for the government to get to the heart of the problem you just discussed. We have to do that as a community. I'm deeply disturbed by the number of children who are not born into families that consist of more than a single parent. I visited a minority school in Washington 2 weeks ago, and 82% of the kids are living in single-parent households, and it was a female. Nothing wrong with that, but it makes for not a solid foundation for that child. And 25% of that 82% were grandmothers, and so the fathers aren't there. And I think somehow, if we cannot recreate a sense of family, a sense of caring, a sense of relatives coming together to keep these children in play, it's going to be a tough problem to solve. The one thing we as a community, either in Indiana, Indianapolis, or anywhere else in the country, and not just the African-American members of that community, but if we as a total community cannot get into the lives of these children at the earliest possible age and start to point them in the right direction, then somebody will be around to point them in the wrong direction. So we can't look to the government. We can't think something magical is going to happen. We can't believe that an election will take place and suddenly programs will be found to solve this problem. This problem has to be solved within the community by mobilizing the community, which is what America's Promise does. They have to be taught to believe in themselves. They have to be taught that there is a future waiting for you, but you got to get it. You know, you got to go get it. And so somehow too many of our kids have lost this, and they never had it in the first place. But in reality, the kids have to do it, and we have to put the burden on them. I was raised in the South Bronx, as our colleague noted earlier, and my parents put into my heart and mind expectations. We expect you to do better than us, and have a sense of shame. Don't shame this family. And too often that's lost. And the culture in which our youngsters are growing up in it does not reinforce these principles any longer. You listen to some of our music, and it's foul, it's misogynistic, it's disgraceful. If Martin Luther King were alive today and listened to some of the lyrics that our kids are listening to, he'd be outraged. Rosa Parks would be outraged. And yet, nobody objects. It's sort of out there, making money for a lot of people. And things like this and some of the reality shows where the worst behavior imaginable is portrayed to the American people as entertainment. But our children are watching this, and they're getting the wrong impressions about what living a good life means.
Words of wisdom from General Colin Powell. Coming up, an exclusive with the third highest ranking member of the U.S. House. And our political insiders debate. What will they say? Find out when we return. For political insiders, the entire family is back from spring break. Our community is dealing with a very serious issue. We're seeing so many young people committing some just troubling crimes. What's the solution?
The solution, I know my good friend Kip, too, is going to say, we need more police officers. Well, you know what? The police are doing their job. The problem is when these young people are taken into juvenile, somebody is not bringing the necessary charges to make sure these folks stay behind bars. As evidenced by the fact that most of these guys, when they're picked up, somebody's got a mugshot. Simeon Adams had 2 prior gun arrests, related arrests, in October and in December of last year. The prosecutor, for some reason, dismissed charges in one, didn't bring charges in another one. He's back out on the street. We need to tighten up the way we do juvenile justice in this town.
Well, he's right. I am going to say there's not enough police officers on the street because there's not enough police officers on the street. The rest of the country, the murder rate is falling. In Indianapolis, the murder rate is going up. We have to take a long, hard look. We have city leaders that need to come together rather than pointing fingers and saying, let's have a comprehensive approach to solving this problem. We cut crime prevention grants several years ago. We're paying for those cuts. We're paying for the cuts in the police force. We have to have more cops on the street. We just have to.
I think we're also paying, too, for, and not to lay blame on anyone at all, but there was a departure away from community policing under when Frank Straub was the public safety director. I'm not saying anything negative about him, but that approach, going to zone policing, may not have been the best way to do it. So,
Jen?
go ahead, Jen.
Those designs that have already been made. We want to talk about police officers. The city has put 150 police officers reassigned from desk jobs to the streets. That's a big number. In addition to that, just in the last 2 weeks, they reassigned 25 officers from Department of Homeland Security into these hotspots to try to tackle the problem. If you want more police officers, the mayor has proposed, and the Democrats have blocked almost 3 or 4 times officially since 2012, a proposal that would add 100 more police officers and that would fund them year after year. And Democrats have stood in the way of that. I don't know what other proposal they have.
I have one if you want to hear it. We are a net donor county of $385 million every year. We need a mayor who can go to the legislature and get our fair share so that we have a permanent funding basis for those police officers. Rather than increasing the taxes on Marion County residents, we need a leader who's going to go get the money to do what we need.
30 seconds.
It's an average of $22 a year for the taxpayers that this would affect. It's an average of $22
But I think it all becomes a question, too, of priorities. We've got to look at, do we want a cricket stadium? Do we want to do a $160 million deal with the Pacers? Or do we want more police? And it's also
or here's a thought. Here's a thought. Maybe we ought to make sure that criminals stay behind bars, and so when juveniles are caught with possession with a gun, they actually are charged. Those charges are filed, and then they actually serve their time.
This becomes part of the finger pointing in the blame game, and that doesn't help. That doesn't help people who lose loved ones.
And the mayor did just get in the legislature an additional 5 to 20 years minimum sentencing for folks who commit crimes while using a gun.
I'm so happy when the family gets back together. Welcome back, guys.
Here's a crazy uncle.
That's right. With a lot of money, unfortunately.
They're going to keep on talking. The conversation between our insiders continues on Twitter. Check out their Twitter handles and give us your opinion. And stay up with Kip, Abdul, Laura, and Jennifer throughout the week. I mean, they're interesting people, really. Send them a tweet. Indianapolis This Week continues after the break.
Right this minute. Videos first. Right this minute. Weekday mornings at 10 on RTV6.
A Sunday morning exclusive. The number 3 Republican in the U.S. House, Congressman Kevin McCarthy of California, traveled to Indiana with 4th District Congressman Todd Rokita. They were in Kokomo on Friday. We sat down to discuss the role of government in reducing crime and the federal budget. You know, across the country, we're seeing young people commit just heinous acts. Indianapolis, just all around the country. What is your role in trying to address this issue, Congressman?
Well, certainly there's a federal role in terms of funding for local programs and things like that. And the fact of the matter is we are spending more money now as a country on this issue from the federal level than we have historically. But that's not the answer. The answer is that we need to empower communities. We need to empower families. We need to build and nurture families. This is caused ultimately by a disintegration of the family unit. And there are amazing programs put on by churches and individuals, clergy here in this city and across the country that are doing really good things with effect. Achieve International, I'm on the board of that, for example, taking really kids that would otherwise be in gangs from school, off the street, to learn the sport of boxing, to channel their energy. And some of those kids now are going to Ivy Tech, finishing their degrees, getting jobs. That's where we need to have the focus. It's not going to come from the federal government.
I see a couple different things, and I agree wholeheartedly with Todd. There's things that we can show that have worked in other communities. If you're just now beginning to have this problem, why do you have to go through all the learning curve? How can you make it more community-oriented to solve that problem? How do you make an economy stronger so you don't have that problem? Where you could have the cop on the beat, you could have them know the community, you could have them part of the community in the process. I find a lot of that helps. But the interesting part is sometimes these problems come in through other communities, through gangs and others. Well, the FBI has a role in an understanding of what's worked other places. Be on the forefront. Explain to your police chief and others what to look out for, what to prepare yourself ahead of time, and what to make sure not to get into your community before it gets there.
Another big issue on the table is the issue of the budget, Mr. McCarthy, and that budget's going to take a look at the realities of the entitlement programs. What things are the priorities? What will you not negotiate on?
Well, first and foremost, we just passed our budget. Todd serves on the budget committee. The president put his budget on the floor and only got 2 votes. There was only 2 Democrats. All the rest voted no. What we won't budge on is that we want a balanced budget. You cannot continue to go forward with a $17 trillion deficit and growing. It's larger than your economy. You can't sustain yourself. You can't continue to ignore the problems of Medicare and others because you want to protect it for the future generations. That's why we take innovation, that we shore it up for now and protect it for a future generation. And you can't continue to have a malaise in this economy. Why don't we make it a simpler tax system where people get to keep their money? It all comes down to, if you fundamental question, who do you trust? Do you trust the individual to make the decision, or do you want all the trust to be in Washington? We trust the individual, and that's why we make a simpler tax code. We balance our budget in 10 years. The others never do, and we do it in a way that expands energy policy, expands opportunity and growth, invests in the future, and secures that Medicare and Medicaid is there for a next generation. We cannot ignore it, and we won't.
Congressman Rokita, how do you sell that, though? Because, you know, the minute you say reform about Medicaid, Medicare, or you talk about Social Security, people go, don't touch my check.
You know, I don't think that's exactly true. I mean, if you do your work, if you have a conversation with Hoosiers, and every time I'm back from Washington, which is every week, we have that conversation and explain, listen, we're living longer. Some of us, like the Warren Buffetts of the world, are getting the same entitlement that you are, that the simplest of us are. And by the way, the health care for the poor in the rest of the country isn't working because it's a one-size-fits-all cram down, unlike the Healthy Indiana plan that Governor Mitch Daniels and Governor Pence has so well started and promoted, and that this whole community has gotten behind. You know, Indiana is showing that we have a lot of the answers to this, so that people that are on these programs now, or soon to be, whether it's Medicaid or Medicare or even Social Security, don't have to be, their promise doesn't have to be changed. It's the younger of us that will get a new, and really because our lifestyles are changed, our longevity's changed, we'll get maybe even a better deal that we can all live under without harming the future generation, because that's the key. Every Hoosier, Rafael, wants the next generation, wants their grandchildren to have a better life than they did. And right now, with the numbers that Kevin and I see through the budget and the data there, the next generation is going to be worse off.
Congressman Rokita, Congressman McCarthy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Please come back again.
Love to.
So what does Colin Powell like most about Indianapolis? A memorable moment with the general when we return. Colin Powell has quite an impressive resume as a public servant. Sit with him for a while and he'll tell you about his fascination with fast cars. That being said, Mr. Powell can't stop talking about driving the pace car at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 2005.
My last most memorable visit in Indianapolis, which I will never forget, and I've been going to lunch on it ever since, is when I drove the pace car in 2005 at the Indianapolis 500. And as I have said to so many friends, I led the Indianapolis 500 for 3 laps.
Yes, you did. Remember, RTV6 is the only place to see the race, and we'll have all of our coverage throughout the month of May with Trackside 6 and the inaugural Indianapolis Grand Prix. That's it for this edition of Indianapolis This Week. I'm Rafael Sanchez. Thanks for joining us, and of course, go Pacers.